Hello! Today I'm going to start a sew along for the Yvonne coatigan pattern. Before I start sewing and demonstrating, I thought I'd just explain a little bit about the pattern and the different options, and also what I'm going to cover today in the sew along. So the Yvonne coatigan pattern is one that I launched earlier this year. It's got two main options. One is the cropped length, which I'm wearing, and this one has a deep armhole and a 3/4 sleeve, so it's kind of got a bit of a kimono feel about it. And the other one is a longer length with a narrow armhole and a narrow sleeve, full length narrow sleeve. And then there are 3 pocket options, so you've got little classic patch pockets, these angled pockets which work well on this shape, and then there's a wraparound pocket. So you can mix and match the sleeves and the pockets on like you can on most patterns. There's a back neck, slightly raised back neck on both of the styles, and really it's so that you can play around and make it into a more of a cardigan or a coat. I've made this one in scuba, so it's kind of got that slightly boxy kimono feel about it, but today I'm going to make one in a boucle, which is exactly the same as the one modelled by my lovely friend here for the instruction book. So this is the longer length, and I'm going to make that exact version with the wraparound pockets and the long slim sleeve. So today basically all I'm going to cover is the neck application, because that's probably the trickiest part. The rest will go together quite quickly, but I think if I show you that part today, and then I'll link up the videos so that you can follow on if you need the rest of the sew along to complete your Yvonne. We'll take it from there. So let's get sewing. So what I've done just ahead of getting started with the sewing is I have applied a very lightweight interfacing to the front facing pieces, and this is only because this fabric is really actually quite thick enough, but what I want to do is just to keep the neck stand a little bit stiffer so it's got some shape. So for that reason I've added this very lightweight interfacing. If you wanted just quite a soft relaxed finish, I probably wouldn't bother interfacing this fabric because it's quite thick and bulky anyway. Like I said, I'm only doing it on the actual front facing pieces, not on the back neck piece. The other thing that I have done just ahead of starting this demonstration is I've overlocked, neatened the shoulder seams of the front and the back pieces. So that's the back, just so that I don't have to keep switching machines. You don't have to do this with an overlocker. You could zigzag finish these edges depending on what kind of fabric you're using, but that, you know, it's not as neat, but it's functional. So on the front pieces I've just gone up and just graded off around the point of the curve there, so that they're nicely finished. In the instructions it indicates to do that at a slightly later stage, but it doesn't really matter which order you do it in as long as it's done. So really the first thing to do is to join the fronts at the centre back neck, because this piece is what's going to create the neck around the back. So all we're doing to start with is just joining across this seam here. So I'm just going to stitch that to start with, and this is on the actual fronts, not the front facings. So you've got a 1.5 centimetre seam allowance on this pattern. So let's sew that. And then the next thing to do is to stay stitch around the corners. I just want you to see where this piece is. So can you see that's the armhole, this is the shoulder seam. So what we're doing, I've just drawn that in chalk, it's sort of faded slightly already, but we're going round there, it's actually a slight curve. But if you follow this around with the 1.5 seam allowance, all you need to do is literally stitch that, so it just gives you a point here when you come to apply the collar, and you'll see in a minute how that'll make sense. I've actually done that on this side so you can see. It's a bit difficult to see the colour, I guess. So we'll do that on this edge. Like I said, sometimes people find it easier to follow a chalk line, or sometimes the gauge on the machine, but either is fine. It doesn't really matter where you start or finish, it's just as long as you've got the curve stitched. So now you should have a piece that looks like this. It's a bit difficult to see at the moment, but can you see the two shoulder seams there? These are the parts we've just stitched with the stay stitching and the centre back. So now what we're going to do is put the back right sides together to these shoulder seams, and this is the bit that feels a bit strange. So I'm going to pin it and show you. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pin one on the front and one on the back, and this is always my thing. I might find it easy one way, you might find it easy the other way, so it's personal preference really. But there we go, we've pinned. So what we're doing is we're sewing. We want to sew, it's going to be from the start of the seam allowance here across the shoulder to the end. So I've pinned that on the front, so you're going really from this, where this starts to angle into a sharp curve. So stitching as accurate as you can get here really, because this is what's going to give you a nice clean finish and get the collar on nice and evenly. So you're stitching from there to there, but it needs to, on the back, it needs to be coming from 1.5 in from this edge. So I've pinned that on that side. So I personally find it easier to see where to start, or to do a little mark at 1.5 in from there, as long as it's pinned accurately and you're close to this seam line that you've just done with the stay stitching, you should be fine. So the stay stitching really is to give you a guideline. I mean, it's to stop it from stretching, but it's also to give you a little guideline when we come to the next stage, which I'll show you. So we just need to sew those shoulder seams, but this back stays open and unstitched at this point. So let's start by sewing those shoulder seams. That's one done. You can see I've started from here down to the end, and I'm going to do exactly the same on the other shoulder. Like I said, I think I prefer to see from the back seam where to stop, so I'm going to just change my pins round. It's worth doing some back stitching at this point here, and at the other end really, but this point will become a weak point if you haven't back stitched well there. And there we go. So now we're going to snip into the stay stitching at that point here. So we're going to do a cut at the angle here into the stay stitching, and this will release this to be able to fit nicely across the back. So let me do that snip and show you. At both sides. So there we go. So you can see the shoulders coming up here. This is the back neck that is not yet stitched down, and there is the cut into either side. So now what we need to do is to match the centre back, so make sure you've marked your centre back of the actual back and then the centre back seam of the collar piece. Start by matching those. And in this instance I would say it's easier to work on the side with the snip so that you can see, because this is the crucial bit to get a really neat finish, is that when you've pinned this round, the shoulder seam needs to run smoothly into this back seam so that you don't get any funny angles at this point here. A fabric like this boucle is actually quite forgiving because the sort of bobbly soft nature of the fabric will mould around any tiny weeny little pleats and things like that, but it might not be quite so or it might be a bit more obvious if you've got a little pucker, if you're using something like you know, something like scuba or French terry. But there we go. So can you see how that now fits across the back neck? And if I pull that up, even though it's just pinned, you can start to see the neck shaping happening. So there we go. So now I'm going to go and stitch this, starting again reinforcing. I'm just going ahead of the snip and reinforcing there, but I don't want to make, I just want to be really careful at that point to not get any little folds, and that's why I'm working from the side with the snip so I can see, and go all the way across, back stitch, and then that's that part finished. You want to butt up to the stitching but don't overlap it. Have it. So what I would do at this stage is I'd just press your shoulder seams open and make that nice and clean, and then what I'm going to do now is do exactly the same thing on the facing pieces, and then we'll be ready to put the thing together. Because I'm doing the one with the wraparound pockets, the pockets are applied towards the end. If you were doing the one with the angled pockets or the one with the patch pockets, you would have done that part first, but if you're following through on the instructions you'll see that. But this is the one with the wraparound pockets, so like I said, we need to do the side seams first. So like I said, I'm going to do the facing piece now. So this is exactly the same. I've already done the stay stitching here, so you can see that probably a bit clearer on there. This is onto the white. So I'm going to start by joining the centre back neck, and then I need to apply these to the facing. So let's do that part to start with. There we have that. And now, instead of, obviously you haven't got such long shoulder seams in this instance, so you're just joining the smaller shoulder seam of the back neck facing to the small shoulder seam of the front neck facing. So these need to match at the ends, and again you'll stop short by the 1.5 at that neck point. So let's pin those. Again, I'm going to work from the back so that I can see where to stop a bit more easily. With this, it's you need to make sure you're not twisted, so that you're not sewing it in a kind of funny knot or anything. There we go. So it's like a mini version of the main part. So I'm going to stop 1.5 before the end of that, exactly the same as the front. I'm going to stitch those now. Again, reinforce well at the start and finish to make sure it's a nice strong point. So again, we're doing exactly the same thing. We're going to cut into the corners to release the neck facing here, and pin that around the neck. So your clip can come up to the point, the end of that stitching. That's a good marker. Again, make sure you've marked the centre of your back neck facing piece, which I haven't, so I'm just going to put a little snip in there, and then match that to the seam so that you centralise. There we go. So exactly the same as the front. And now I'm going to stitch that. Have the facing. So let's have a look. The next part on the instructions is to insert the sleeve, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring you part 2 of the video, and I will prepare the sleeves. And we'll go through the sleeves and applying the front facing in the next video, and possibly a third video just to finish finish it off with the pockets and the last pieces. So you should, but that really is the trickiest part of making this, just getting that facing, those corners sorted out. But if you centralise here and you make the snip in the right place, you shouldn't really have any problems with that. And like I said, working with something that's soft and pliable like this is probably your easiest option on making sure it's a nice neat job too. But other than that, I think you'll find the rest of this fairly straightforward to make. So like I said, we'll carry on in the next video, applying the sleeves and the neck facing, and I shall see you then.